6-year-old girl tugged at her billionaire father's sleeve and asked, "Daddy, why is the waitress sleeping outside?" He froze, realizing her innocent words would change their lives forever. Before we proceed, I need to be honest. If you don't hit that subscribe button, the algorithm might never show you our content again. Your comments and shares are the lifeline of this channel. Don't let this be our first and last encounter. It's time to begin our narrative. The December wind cut through Manhattan like a blade, carrying the promise of the year's first snow. Daniel Sterling pulled his Armani coat tighter as he walked down Fifth Avenue, his 6-year-old daughter Emma's small hand tucked securely in his. At 29, he commanded a tech empire worth $3 billion, but tonight he was just a father trying to get his daughter home from her piano lesson. "Daddy, look." Emma's sweet voice pierced through his mental calculations about tomorrow's board meeting. She tugged at his sleeve, pointing across the street where a figure huddled against the brick wall of a closed cafe. "That lady looks cold." Daniel's first instinct was to hurry past. He dealt with enough problems running Sterling Dynamics without getting involved in New York's homeless situation. But Emma had stopped walking entirely, her brown eyes, so much like her late mother's, fixed on the woman across the street. "Emma, we need to get home. Mrs. Patterson is waiting with dinner." "But Daddy, she doesn't have a warm coat like us." Daniel glanced over reluctantly and felt his breath catch. Even in the dim streetlight, he could see this wasn't the typical homeless person his mind had conjured. The woman was young, maybe mid-20s, with long black hair that caught the light like silk despite its obvious need for washing. Her clothes were worn but clean, and she sat with a dignity that seemed incongruous with her circumstances. "Please, Daddy. Mommy always said we should help people who need it." The mention of Sarah hit Daniel like it always did, a sharp pain in his chest that 3 years hadn't dulled. His wife had been the heart of their little family, the one who reminded him that money meant nothing without compassion. He'd lost that part of himself when cancer took her. 5 minutes, he heard himself saying, though every rational part of his brain screamed against it. They crossed the street, Emma practically bouncing with excitement. As they got closer, Daniel noticed more details that didn't fit his preconceptions. The woman's hands were clean, her nails neat despite their length. A small stack of worn books sat beside her, including what looked like a Harvard Business Review. "Excuse me," Emma said before Daniel could stop her. "Are you cold?" The woman looked up, and Daniel felt something electric shoot through him. Her eyes were the deepest green he'd ever seen, intelligent and proud despite her situation. There was something familiar about her face, though he couldn't place it. "I'm okay, sweetheart," the woman replied, her voice carrying traces of an accent he couldn't identify. "Thank you for asking." "This is my daddy," Emma continued, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. "He owns a big company. Maybe he could give you a job." Daniel felt his face heat with embarrassment. "Emma, that's not—" "I don't need charity," the woman interrupted, her voice sharp but not unkind. She struggled to her feet, and Daniel was surprised by her height. She was probably 5'7", with a frame that suggested she'd been better fed in recent times. "I didn't mean to imply—" Daniel started, but she was already gathering her few possessions. "Maya," she said suddenly, extending a surprisingly firm hand. "Maya Chen. Daniel Sterling." Her handshake was confident, professional even. "And this is Emma." "Sterling Dynamics," Maya said, recognition flickering in her eyes. "I know your company." Something in her tone made Daniel study her more carefully. "Do we know each other?" Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I doubt our paths would have crossed, Mr. Sterling. I'm just a waitress." But Daniel had spent years reading people in boardrooms, and Maya Chen was lying. The way she carried herself, the vocabulary she used, even her handshake, nothing about her suggested someone who'd spent her life serving tables. "Where do you work?" he asked. "I don't currently, hence the sidewalk accommodations." Emma giggled at Maya's dry delivery, and despite himself, Daniel found his mouth twitching. Maya caught his almost smile and raised an eyebrow. "Did I say something amusing, Mr. Sterling? Your vocabulary is rather sophisticated for a—" He caught himself before finishing the sentence. "For a homeless waitress?" Maya's eyes flashed with something dangerous. How refreshing. A billionaire with preconceptions about the working class. I didn't mean, of course you didn't. Maya shouldered a worn messenger bag that looked expensive despite its condition. Thank you for the conversation, but I should find somewhere warmer for the night. Wait, Emma piped up, tugging off her pink cashmere scarf. Take this. Mommy bought it for me, but she's in heaven now and I think she'd want you to have it. Daniel's heart clenched as Maya's expression softened completely. She knelt to Emma's level, and for a moment her mask of cynical amusement dropped entirely. That's very kind, but I couldn't take something so special. Please? Emma's eyes were huge. It gets really cold at night. Daddy says so. Maya looked up at Daniel, and he saw vulnerability flash across her features before she could hide it. Emma, he said gently, maybe we could help Maya find somewhere warm to stay tonight. I told you I don't need... It's not charity, Daniel interrupted, his CEO voice taking over. Consider it a business proposition. Maya's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? My housekeeper is getting older. She could use help with Emma when I'm traveling, and Emma clearly likes you. It was a complete lie. Mrs. Patterson was only 55 and perfectly capable, but something about Maya Chen intrigued him in a way nothing had since Sarah died. You don't know anything about me, Maya said carefully. I know you're intelligent, well-educated despite what you claim, and you were kind to my daughter. That's more than I can say for most of my employees. Maya studied his face as if trying to read his motives. And in exchange? Room and board, a salary. We can discuss details somewhere warmer. The first snowflakes began to fall, and Emma clapped her hands in delight. Snow! Maya, you have to come home with us now. Daddy makes the best hot chocolate. I don't cook, Daniel admitted, earning another almost smile from Maya. Lucky for you, I do, Maya said quietly. Then louder. All right, Emma, but just for tonight. As they walked toward Daniel's waiting car, he caught Maya's reflection in a shop window. For just a moment, her mask slipped again, and he saw something that made his chest tighten. A grief that matched his own, and a wariness that spoke of betrayals he couldn't imagine. Maya, he said suddenly, whatever happened to put you on that street, it wasn't your fault. She stopped walking and turned to face him, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. How could you possibly know that? Because I recognize the look of someone who's been dealt an unfair hand. The question is whether you're going to let it define you. Maya's green eyes searched his face for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Some hands are harder to recover from than others, Mr. Sterling. As Daniel opened the car door for her, he found himself wondering what cards Maya Chen had been dealt, and why he was suddenly desperate to help her win the next round. The Sterling penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building that Daniel owned, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Central Park dusted with fresh snow. Maya tried not to let her jaw drop as they entered the marble foyer, though she couldn't help noticing the original Monet hanging casually by the elevator. Wow, Emma breathed, apparently seeing the apartment through a guest's eyes for the first time. Daddy, our house is really big, isn't it? It serves its purpose, Daniel replied, though Maya caught him watching her reaction carefully. She kept her expression neutral, having learned to hide her thoughts from men with too much money and power. Mrs. Patterson, a warm-faced woman with silver hair, appeared from what Maya assumed was the kitchen. Mr. Sterling, you're later than... She stopped mid-sentence, taking in Maya's appearance with kind but curious eyes. Mrs. Patterson, this is Maya Chen. She'll be staying in the guest room tonight. If the housekeeper was surprised by this announcement, she hid it well. Of course, shall I prepare some dinner? Miss Emma hasn't eaten. Maya's going to make hot chocolate, Emma announced, bouncing on her toes. She said she knows how to cook. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, Daniel said firmly. Emma, why don't you show Maya where everything is? As Emma dragged her toward the kitchen, Maya marveled at the space. The kitchen was larger than most New York apartments, with commercial-grade appliances and a marble island that probably cost more than she'd made in a year back when she had a salary. Do you know how to make real hot chocolate? Emma asked, climbing onto a bar stool. Not the powder kind? I think I can manage that, Maya replied, already scanning the cabinets. To her surprise, they were well stocked with high-quality ingredients. Your dad cooks? Emma giggled. Daddy burns water. Mrs. Patterson does all the cooking, but she went home to see her sister last weekend and Daddy ordered pizza 3 times. Maya found herself smiling as she gathered cocoa powder, vanilla, and heavy cream. Well, we can't have that, can we? As she heated milk on the stove, Maya became aware of Daniel watching from the doorway. He'd removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that were more muscular than she'd expected from a desk-bound CEO. "Smells good," he said, moving to pour himself a glass of wine from an expensive-looking bottle. "It's just hot chocolate," Maya replied, whisking the mixture carefully. "I meant you know your way around a kitchen. Most people would have asked where to find things." Maya's hand stilled for just a moment. She'd been too comfortable, too familiar with the setup. Any normal person would have needed guidance in a kitchen this size. "I'm observant," she said finally, "so I'm noticing." Daniel's voice carried that note of curiosity again. "Emma, why don't you go wash your hands?" When Emma had skipped out of the room, Daniel moved closer to the stove. Maya was acutely aware of his proximity, the way his expensive cologne mixed with something that was purely him. "You want to tell me who you really are?" he asked quietly. Maya's heart rate spiked, but she kept her voice level. "I told you I'm a waitress. A waitress who recognizes commercial kitchen equipment and knows the difference between Ceylon and regular cinnamon?" Damn. Maya hadn't even realized she'd reached for the expensive spice. "I worked in upscale restaurants. Try again." Maya turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. "You're very persistent for someone offering charity. And you're very evasive for someone accepting it." Their eyes locked, and Maya felt that electric tension from earlier crackling between them again. Daniel was close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough that if she leaned forward just slightly. "Daddy, I'm back." Emma's voice broke the spell, and both adults stepped apart quickly. "Perfect timing," Maya said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice as she poured the hot chocolate into mugs. She added a dollop of whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon to Emma's cup. "This is the best hot chocolate ever," Emma declared after her first sip. "Better than Mrs. Patterson's?" Daniel asked, though his eyes were still on Maya. "Don't tell her I said yes," Emma whispered conspiratorially. Despite herself, Maya laughed. "Your secret's safe with me." "Maya," Emma said suddenly, "do you have any kids?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow. She must have paled because Daniel immediately stepped forward. "Emma, that's a personal question." "It's okay," Maya managed, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "No, sweetheart, no children." "Do you want some? Kids, I mean." Maya's throat tightened. Once upon a time she'd planned for children, a boy and a girl, maybe 2 girls. She and David had even picked out names. That's complicated," she whispered. Emma seemed to sense the shift in mood. "I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong? Something?" "No, baby," Maya said quickly, kneeling to Emma's level. "You didn't do anything wrong. Some topics are just sad for grown-ups sometimes. Like how Daddy gets sad when people ask about Mommy." Maya glanced up at Daniel, seeing her own pain reflected in his eyes. "Yes, like that. Mommy said sadness gets smaller when you share it with people who care about you." Out of the mouths of babes. Maya felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back quickly. "Your mommy sounds like she was very wise," Maya said softly. "She was," Daniel said, his voice rough. "She was the best person I knew." An uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. Maya busied herself cleaning up, hyper-aware of Daniel's presence as he helped Emma with her homework at the kitchen island. "Maya," Emma said suddenly, "do you like puzzles?" "Depends on the puzzle. Daddy bought me a 1,000-piece one, but it's too hard. Will you help me?" Maya glanced at Daniel, who nodded. "If you want. I should warn you I can be competitive about puzzles." "So can I," Emma grinned. "Daddy gives up too easy." "I do not give up easy," Daniel protested with mock offense. "I strategically redirect my energy toward more productive activities." "That's fancy talk for giving up," Maya said without thinking. Emma dissolved into giggles while Daniel's mouth dropped open in exaggerated shock. Did you just call me out? I called out your corporate speak, Maya corrected, surprising herself with how easy the banter felt. There's a difference. Enlighten me. Maya studied his face, noting the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he was amused. Corporate speak is designed to hide the truth behind impressive vocabulary. You just used 6 words where 2 would have sufficed. Which 2 words? I quit. Daniel laughed, actually laughed, and the sound transformed his entire face. For a moment, Maya could see past the CEO mask to the man underneath, and her heart did something dangerous in her chest. I like her, Daddy, Emma announced. She's funny. She certainly has opinions, Daniel agreed, his eyes still twinkling with amusement. Speaking of opinions, Maya said, forcing herself to look away from his smile. Where exactly am I sleeping tonight? Because if it's somewhere with thread count higher than my last month's salary, I might need to prepare myself psychologically. Daniel's grin widened. The guest room has perfectly reasonable thread count. Probably only twice your former salary. Former? Maya's blood went cold. She'd slipped again. Daniel's expression grew serious. You said last month's salary, past tense, but you also said you're currently unemployed. Maya's mind raced. She was making too many mistakes, getting too comfortable. This was exactly how she'd ended up losing everything before. Trusting the wrong person, letting her guard down at the worst possible moment. I should go, she said abruptly, setting down her mug with trembling hands. Maya, wait. No, she said more firmly, backing toward the kitchen entrance. This was a mistake. I don't belong here. That's not true, Daniel said, moving to block her path. Whatever you're running from. You don't know what you're talking about, Maya snapped, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. You live in a penthouse that costs more than most people's houses. You think buying someone dinner makes you understand their problems? I think, Daniel said quietly, that you're scared of letting anyone help you because someone you trusted betrayed that trust. Badly. The accuracy of his words hit Maya like a slap. How could this stranger read her so easily when she'd spent months perfecting her emotional armor? Maya, Emma's small voice cut through the tension. Please don't go. I never get to have friends over. Maya looked down at the little girl's earnest face and felt her resolve crumble. Emma had lost her mother, and here Maya was, threatening to abandon her too over her own paranoia. I'm sorry, Maya said, kneeling beside Emma's chair. I didn't mean to upset you. Sometimes grown-ups get scared for silly reasons. Are you scared of Daddy? Emma asked with 6-year-old directness. Maya glanced up at Daniel, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. No, sweetheart. I'm scared of me. That's silly, Emma declared. You're nice, and you make good hot chocolate. Daddy, tell her she can stay. Maya can make her own choices, Daniel said carefully. But I hope she chooses to stay. Maya studied his face, looking for any sign of the manipulative charm she'd fallen for before. But Daniel's expression was open, genuine. When he looked at her, she didn't see calculation. She saw something that made her stomach flutter with entirely inappropriate feelings. One night, she said finally, and tomorrow we discuss this arrangement properly, with boundaries. Deal, Daniel said immediately. Though I should warn you, Emma's very persuasive when she wants something. What do I want? Emma asked innocently. A new best friend, Daniel replied, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. As Maya followed Emma toward the puzzle table, she caught her reflection in the darkened window. For the first time in months, she didn't look like a woman who'd lost everything. She looked like someone who might just possibly be ready to start over. But starting over meant trusting again. And trust, Maya had learned, was the most dangerous game of all. Maya woke to the smell of burning toast, and Emma's giggles echoing through the penthouse. The guest room bed had been more comfortable than anywhere she'd slept in months, and for a blissful moment she'd forgotten where she was. Then reality crashed back. She was in Daniel Sterling's home, having agreed to a job she wasn't qualified for with a man who asked too many questions. She found them in the kitchen, where Daniel stood over the toaster with a look of intense concentration, while Emma perched on the counter, swinging her legs. "Daddy's burning breakfast again," Emma announced cheerfully. "He says he's interfacing with the appliance, but I think he just doesn't know how to make toast." "I'm calibrating the settings," Daniel protested, though Maya caught the hint of a smile at his daughter's assessment. "Have you tried reading the manual?" Maya asked from the doorway. Daniel turned, and Maya's breath caught slightly. He was dressed for work in a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, but his hair was slightly mussed and there was a boyish frustration on his face that made him infinitely more appealing than any CEO had a right to be. "Real men don't read appliance manuals," he said with mock seriousness. "Real men also don't burn toast," Maya countered, moving to rescue the smoking bread. "Step aside before you set off the fire alarm." As she brushed past him to reach the toaster, Maya was acutely aware of his proximity. He smelled like expensive aftershave and something that was purely him, clean and masculine and entirely too distracting. "Show off," Daniel muttered, but he was smiling. Maya quickly prepared fresh toast while eggs scrambled in a pan. "Emma, what do you like for breakfast?" "Pancakes, but Daddy can't make those either." "I make excellent reservations," Daniel defended himself. "Four-star restaurants love me." "Your domestic skills are truly impressive," Maya said dryly, plating the eggs. "How did you survive before Mrs. Patterson?" "Takeout and sheer determination." Emma giggled again, and Maya found herself relaxing despite her better judgment. There was something appealing about seeing Daniel Sterling, master of the universe, defeated by basic kitchen appliances. "Maya," Emma said around a bite of perfectly golden toast, "are you going to stay and take care of me?" The casual question hit Maya unexpectedly. She glanced at Daniel, who was watching her carefully over his coffee cup. "We haven't discussed the details yet," Maya said carefully. "But you'll consider it?" Daniel asked. The offer was genuine. Maya studied his face, looking for any sign of ulterior motives. But his expression was sincere, almost hopeful in a way that made her chest tighten with unwanted emotion. "I'd need to know exactly what you're expecting," she said finally. "Emma needs someone reliable when I travel. Someone who can help with homework, make sure she eats actual meals instead of cereal for dinner." "Cereal for dinner is perfectly nutritious," Emma protested. "Lucky Charms don't count as nutrition," Daniel replied automatically, then looked surprised at his own words. "See? I need help." Despite herself, Maya smiled. "What about references? Background checks? For all you know, I could be a con artist." "Are you?" "That's exactly what a con artist would say if asked." Daniel's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Fair point, but something tells me you're more likely to be running from trouble than causing it." Maya's smile faded. He was entirely too perceptive for her peace of mind. "Daddy has good instincts about people," Emma added helpfully. "Except for Uncle Richard, Mommy never liked him." Daniel's expression darkened slightly at the mention of Richard, and Maya filed that information away. There was clearly tension there. "Emma, finish your breakfast. The driver will be here soon for school." As Emma focused on her food, Daniel moved closer to Maya. "Think about it," he said quietly. "Whatever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone." The kindness in his voice made Maya's throat tight. It had been so long since anyone had offered her genuine help without expecting something in return. "I should warn you," she said, matching his low tone. "I'm not good at trusting people anymore." "Good," Daniel replied, surprising her. "That means you won't be easily fooled. Emma needs someone who's careful about who they let into her life." Before Maya could respond, Emma jumped down from her chair. "I need to get my backpack. Maya, will you help me pick out clothes for tomorrow? Mrs. Patterson always lets me choose." "If I'm still here tomorrow," Maya said carefully. "You will be," Emma said with 6-year-old certainty. "Daddy needs you. He pretends he's good at everything, but he's not good at kid stuff." "Emma," Daniel protested, but he was laughing. "It's true. You didn't know I needed new shoes until mine had holes. And you thought my teacher's note about behavioral concerns meant I was being bad. But I was just bored because the math is too easy." Maya raised an eyebrow at Daniel. "Behavioral concerns?" "She corrected her teacher's math," Daniel admitted sheepishly, "in front of the entire class. Apparently, Humiliating adults isn't considered appropriate for first graders. Where on earth would she learn that behavior? Maya asked innocently. Daniel's mouth dropped open in mock offense. Are you implying I have a problem with authority figures? I'm not implying anything, I'm stating it directly. Emma dissolved into giggles while Daniel clutched his chest dramatically. Wounded by my own houseguest, Emma, remind me to dock Maya's salary for insubordination. What's insubordination? Emma asked. Telling the truth when Daddy doesn't want to hear it, Maya replied before Daniel could answer. Then Maya's really good at it, Emma announced, making both adults laugh. As they prepared to leave for school and work, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of belonging. The easy banter with Daniel, Emma's innocent acceptance, even Mrs. Patterson's kind smile when she arrived to take over, it all felt dangerously like home. Maya, Daniel said as he gathered his briefcase, there's something I should mention. I'm having dinner with my business partner tonight, Richard Webb, if you're still here when we get back. The uncle Emma mentioned? Daniel nodded, his expression growing serious. Richard can be challenging. He has strong opinions about appropriate social boundaries. Maya understood immediately. He won't approve of the help sleeping in the guest room. His approval isn't required, Daniel said firmly, but I wanted to warn you. Richard values appearances above almost everything else. Don't worry, Maya said quietly. I'm used to people like him. Something flashed in Daniel's eyes, anger, Maya thought, though she wasn't sure if it was directed at her or the situation. You shouldn't have to be. Before she could respond, Emma bounced back into the room with her backpack. Ready, Maya, can you pick me up from school? Mrs. Patterson has a doctor's appointment. Maya glanced at Daniel, who nodded. If you're comfortable with that. The school has your information on file as an approved guardian. The casual way he said it made Maya's chest flutter. When was the last time someone had trusted her with something so precious? I'd be honored, she said softly. As father and daughter prepared to leave, Emma hugged Maya goodbye as if she'd been part of their family for years instead of hours. The spontaneous affection made Maya's eyes prick with unexpected tears. Think about staying, Daniel said quietly as Emma skipped toward the elevator. Please. After they left, Maya wandered the penthouse, taking in details she'd missed the night before. Family photos showed a younger Daniel with a beautiful blonde woman who must have been his late wife. The love between them was evident in every image, and Maya felt a pang of something that might have been envy. In Daniel's study, she found diplomas from Harvard and Wharton, business awards, and photos with various political figures and celebrities. But what caught her attention was a small framed picture tucked behind the others, Daniel and Emma, at what looked like a father-daughter dance, both grinning widely at the camera. He was a good father, she realized. Despite his obvious wealth and demanding career, Daniel clearly prioritized his daughter. It was unexpectedly attractive. Maya was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Mrs. Patterson approach until the older woman spoke. He's a good man, Mrs. Patterson said gently. It's been hard for him since Sarah died. Emma, too. I can imagine, Maya replied, setting down the photo carefully. She seems to have taken to you immediately. That's unusual. Emma's been wary of new people since her mother passed. Maya felt the weight of that trust settling on her shoulders. She's a special little girl. Indeed she is. And she needs someone who understands that healing takes time. Mrs. Patterson's knowing look made Maya wonder exactly what the older woman had intuited about her situation. As the morning passed, Maya found herself making a mental list of reasons to stay and reasons to run. The stay list was surprisingly long. Emma's obvious need for stability, Daniel's unexpected kindness, the chance to rebuild her life from something other than rock bottom. But the run list was simple and compelling. Daniel Sterling represented everything she'd learned to distrust. Wealth, power, the ability to destroy someone's life with a few well-placed phone calls. She'd been down this road before with disastrous results. The difference was that David had hidden his cruelty behind charm and false promises. Daniel seemed genuinely kind, but Maya had learned the hard way that even good men could become ruthless when their interests were threatened. By the time she left to pick up Emma from school, Maya still hadn't made her decision. But as she watched Emma's face light up when she spotted her at the school gates, Maya felt her carefully constructed walls crumble just a little more. "Maya, you came!" Emma launched herself into Maya's arms with enthusiasm that took her breath away. "Of course I came," Maya said, hugging the little girl close. "I keep my promises." "Good," Emma said seriously. "Daddy says promises are the most important thing. That's why he's sad sometimes, because he promised Mommy he'd take good care of me, and he thinks he's not doing a good job." Maya's heart clenched at the insight. Daniel Sterling might be a billionaire CEO, but he was also a grieving widower trying to be both parents to a precocious 6-year-old. No wonder he seemed exhausted despite his success. "Your daddy loves you very much," Maya said as they walked toward the car Daniel had left for her use. "Sometimes love makes us worry too much about doing everything perfectly." "Do you think he's doing a good job?" Emma asked with the directness only children possessed. Maya thought about Daniel's obvious devotion to his daughter, his willingness to help a stranger, the way he'd laughed at Emma's teasing that morning. "I think," Maya said carefully, "that your daddy is doing the best he can, and that's usually good enough." As they drove home through the afternoon traffic, Emma chattered about her day, and Maya found herself relaxing into the rhythm of normal life. For the first time in months, she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder or calculating escape routes. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running. But as they pulled into the building's garage, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her past wasn't finished with her yet. And when it caught up, as it inevitably would, Daniel Sterling and his daughter would be caught in the crossfire. The question was whether Maya cared enough about them to leave before that happened, or whether she'd finally found something worth fighting for. The evening started well. Maya had helped Emma with homework, prepared a simple dinner, and was reading her a bedtime story when Daniel returned home with his business partner. She heard their voices in the foyer, Daniel's warm baritone and another man's clipped, aristocratic tones that immediately set her on edge. "Emma should be asleep soon," Daniel was saying as they approached the living room. "Maya, I'd like you to meet Richard Webb." Maya looked up from the children's book and felt her blood turn to ice. Standing beside Daniel was a man she knew all too well, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of cold blue eyes that had haunted her nightmares for months. Richard Webb, Daniel's business partner and best friend, was the same Richard Webb who had destroyed her life, stolen her company, and left her with nothing but the clothes on her back. "Well, well," Richard said, his voice carrying that familiar note of cruel amusement. "If it isn't the infamous Maya Chen, how unexpected." Daniel's head snapped between them, confusion clear on his face. "You two know each other?" Maya's mouth went dry. She could see the calculation in Richard's eyes, the satisfaction of a predator who'd cornered his prey. Emma was still curled against her side, innocent and trusting, completely unaware that her safe world was about to implode. "Oh, we know each other very well," Richard continued, moving closer with the confidence of a man who held all the cards. "Though I'm surprised to find you fallen so far, Maya. From CEO to... what are you now? A nanny?" "Richard," Daniel's voice carried a warning. "What's going on? You mean you don't know?" Richard's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Daniel, meet Maya Chen, former CEO of Chen Dynamics. Or should I say, former CEO of the company I acquired 6 months ago after some very unfortunate irregularities came to light." Maya felt Emma's small body tense against her, as the adults' voices grew strained. She forced herself to stand slowly, gently moving Emma aside. "Emma, sweetheart, why don't you go brush your teeth? I'll be up to tuck you in shortly." "But Maya..." "Go ahead, baby," Daniel said quietly, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "Adults need to talk." As soon as Emma was out of earshot, Richard's mask of civility dropped completely. "Embezzlement, wasn't it?" he said conversationally. $50 million diverted to offshore accounts. Very creative, I must admit, though not creative enough to avoid detection. "That's not what happened," Maya said, finding her voice at last. "You framed me. You stole my company and destroyed my reputation because I wouldn't sell to you." Richard laughed, the sound devoid of any real humor. Such an active imagination. Daniel, surely you've done a background check on someone you're allowing near your daughter. Maya watched Daniel's face change as the implications sank in. The warmth in his eyes cooled, replaced by the calculating look of a businessman protecting his interests. Is it true? Daniel asked quietly. Were you accused of embezzlement? Accused, yes. Guilty, no. Maya's voice was steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. Richard orchestrated the whole thing. He wanted Chen Dynamics for a fraction of its worth, and when I refused to sell, he planted evidence to make it look like I was stealing from my own company. Of course she'd say that, Richard interjected smoothly. Criminals always maintain their innocence. Daniel, this woman is a convicted felon. She's been living on the streets because no reputable company will hire her. I was never convicted, Maya said sharply. The charges were dropped when the evidence proved insufficient. But by then the damage was done. Richard made sure of that. Daniel's silence was deafening. Maya could practically see him processing the information, weighing her word against that of his oldest friend and business partner. Daniel, Richard said, his voice taking on a tone of reasonable concern. You can't possibly believe her story over documented evidence. I have the FBI reports, the forensic accounting findings. Reports you manufactured, Maya interrupted desperately. You had inside help from David Morrison, my former CFO and fiancé. He gave you access to our systems, helped you plant the false transactions. Richard's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. Ah yes, poor David. Such a tragedy, what happened to him? Maya's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Haven't you heard? David Morrison died in a car accident 3 weeks ago. Lost control on a winding mountain road. Very unfortunate. The room seemed to spin around Maya. David was dead? The only person who could corroborate her story, who could expose Richard's crimes, was gone. You killed him, she whispered. I did no such thing, Richard replied calmly. Though I must say his conscience seemed to be troubling him lately. He'd been making inquiries about reopening your case. Guilt can be such a burden. Maya sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. David had been trying to make things right. After everything he'd done to her, he'd been planning to tell the truth. Daniel, Richard continued, his voice taking on a paternal tone. Surely you can see the danger here. This woman is clearly unstable. The accusations, the paranoid conspiracy theories. She's exactly the kind of person who might harm Emma to get revenge against those she blames for her downfall. That's not true, Maya said weakly, but she could see doubt creeping into Daniel's expression. Richard was a master manipulator, and he was playing on every fear a single father might have about trusting the wrong person with his child. I think, Daniel said slowly, his voice eerily calm, that you should leave. Tonight. The words hit Maya like physical blows. After everything they'd shared, after the connection she'd felt growing between them, he was choosing to believe Richard over her. Daniel, please, she began, but he held up a hand to stop her. I won't have Emma exposed to this kind of uncertainty. Richard, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Of course, Richard replied smoothly. I only wish I'd known sooner, though I suppose no real harm was done. Maya stood on shaking legs, her heart breaking as she realized how thoroughly she'd been outplayed. Richard had waited, watched, and struck at the perfect moment to destroy any chance she might have had at rebuilding her life. I'll pack my things, she said quietly. Maya. Daniel's voice stopped her at the doorway. For a moment, she thought she heard regret in his tone. For what it's worth, I hope you find a way to prove your innocence. But he didn't believe her. That much was clear. As Maya gathered her few possessions from the guest room, she could hear Emma calling for her from down the hall. The little girl didn't understand why Maya was leaving, why the bedtime story had been interrupted, why the adults all looked so serious. I have to go away for a while, Maya told her gently, kneeling beside Emma's bed. But why? Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, you're perfect. Sometimes grown-up problems get complicated and I need to go solve mine. Will you come back? Maya's throat closed up completely. She couldn't promise something that would never happen. Take care of your daddy, okay? He loves you more than anything in the world. As Maya walked past Daniel's study, she could hear him and Richard talking in low voices. The phrases she caught made her stomach turn. Background verification, security concerns, protecting Emma's interests. She slipped out of the penthouse like a ghost, taking nothing that wasn't hers, leaving no trace that she'd ever been there except for the dishes she'd washed and the half-finished puzzle on Emma's table. Outside, the December wind cut through her thin jacket with vicious efficiency. Maya stood on the sidewalk where Daniel had found her just 2 days earlier, and realized she was right back where she'd started. Except now, somehow, she felt even more lost than before. Richard had won again. He'd taken her company, her reputation, her fiancé, and now he'd poisoned the first chance at happiness she'd had in months. David was dead, taking the truth with him to his grave. But as Maya walked away from Daniel's building, one thought burned bright in her mind. Richard Webb had made one crucial mistake. He'd revealed himself too early, shown his hand too clearly. David's death wasn't an accident. Richard had as good as admitted it. And if Maya could prove that, she could prove everything else. She'd lost this battle, but the war was far from over. And now she had more than just her own life to fight for. She had Emma's smile to remember, Daniel's laugh to hold on to, and the hope that someday, somehow, she'd be able to return and claim the family she'd never expected to find. Richard Webb thought he'd destroyed her once and for all. He was about to learn just how wrong he could be. 2 weeks after Maya's abrupt departure, Daniel Sterling stood in his office, staring out at the Manhattan skyline while Richard Webb droned on about quarterly projections. But Daniel's mind wasn't on business, it was on green eyes and the way Maya had looked when she'd said goodbye to Emma. "You're not listening," Richard observed with mild irritation. "I'm listening," Daniel lied, turning from the window. "You were saying something about market penetration. I was saying that you've been distracted since we had to remove that security threat from your home. I hope you're not having second thoughts about our decision." Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd spent sleepless nights questioning that decision, especially when Emma asked daily when Maya was coming back. The little girl had cried herself to sleep for a week, and nothing Daniel did seemed to comfort her. She wasn't a security threat, Daniel said quietly. She was a woman in trouble. A woman accused of embezzling $50 million, Richard corrected sharply. "Daniel, your protective instincts are admirable, but you can't let them cloud your judgment, especially when Emma's safety is involved." Before Daniel could respond, his assistant knocked and entered with obvious reluctance. "Mr. Sterling, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's about Maya Chen." Daniel's heart rate spiked. "Send her in." The woman who entered was about 40, with graying blonde hair and the tired look of someone who'd been carrying a heavy burden. She clutched a manila envelope to her chest like a lifeline. "Mr. Sterling? My name is Jennifer Morrison. I was David Morrison's sister." Richard had gone very still in his chair, Daniel noticed. His business partner's face had taken on a carefully neutral expression that Daniel had learned to associate with Richard's most dangerous moods. "I'm sorry for your loss," Daniel said gently. "Please, sit down." Jennifer perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, her knuckles white around the envelope. "David wasn't the man I thought he was, Mr. Sterling. He did terrible things, but before he died, he was trying to make them right. I'm not sure what this has to do with," Richard began, but Jennifer cut him off. "It has everything to do with Maya Chen and what you did to her." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Daniel moved to close the office door, his instincts telling him that whatever Jennifer Morrison had to say needed to be heard privately. "David called me 3 weeks before he died," Jennifer continued, her voice gaining strength. "He was terrified. Said he'd been part of something horrible, that he'd helped destroy an innocent woman's life for money. He gave me this envelope and made me promise to open it if anything happened to him." She held out the manila envelope with shaking hands. Daniel took it, aware of Richard's intense focus on his every movement. "He said there were people who would kill to keep the truth buried," Jennifer whispered. "I didn't believe him until he ended up dead on that mountain road." "Your brother's death was an accident," Richard said smoothly, but Daniel caught the edge in his voice. "Tragic, but hardly mysterious. David was the most careful driver I knew, Jennifer replied, her eyes flashing. He hadn't had so much as a speeding ticket in 15 years. But that night, according to the police report, he somehow lost control on a road he'd driven hundreds of times and went straight through a guardrail. Daniel opened the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside were dozens of documents, computer printouts, and what appeared to be copies of financial records. At the top was a handwritten letter in careful script. "If you're reading this, then I'm probably dead, and it means Richard Webb has decided I'm too much of a liability to let live," Daniel read aloud, his voice growing steadier with each word. "Everything you've been told about Maya Chen is a lie. I helped Richard Webb frame her for embezzlement that never happened. I planted false evidence, created fake transactions, and perjured myself in sworn statements because Richard promised me Maya's position as CEO and threatened to destroy my career if I refused." Richard had risen from his chair, his face flushed with anger. "Daniel, you can't seriously believe this fabrication." The man was clearly mentally unstable. "The documents detail everything," Daniel continued reading. "How Richard manipulated our company's board, how he used shell companies to hide the money he claimed Maya stole, how he orchestrated a systematic campaign to destroy her reputation and force her out of business." "This is ridiculous," Richard snapped. David Morrison was facing his own investigation for financial irregularities. Of course he'd try to blame someone else for his crimes. But Daniel was studying the financial records with the eye of someone who'd built his fortune on understanding money flows and corporate structures. The patterns were clear, the fabricated transactions obvious once you knew what to look for. "These shell companies," Daniel said slowly, "they're registered to addresses that don't exist. The bank account numbers are sequenced in a way that suggests they were created simultaneously. This isn't the work of someone covering their embezzlement. This is the work of someone manufacturing evidence." "Richard," Jennifer Morrison said quietly, "my brother recorded your phone conversations. All of them." The color drained from Richard's face. "You're bluffing." Jennifer reached into her purse and produced a small digital recorder. "Would you like me to play the one where you threaten to have him killed if he doesn't falsify the forensic accounting reports?" The silence in the office was deafening. Daniel stared at his oldest friend, the man who'd been his best man at his wedding, Emma's godfather, his business partner for over a decade. "How long?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long what?" Richard replied, but his bravado was cracking. "How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been using our partnership to destroy innocent people?" Richard's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cold ambition that had always lurked beneath his charming exterior. Maya Chen was hardly innocent. She was weak, sentimental, running her company like a charity instead of a business. I saw an opportunity to acquire valuable assets at a fraction of their worth, and I took it. You framed her for crimes she didn't commit. I created a narrative that served everyone's interests. Chen Dynamics needed stronger leadership. I needed the technology patents they'd developed, and Maya needed to learn that the business world isn't a place for bleeding hearts. Daniel felt sick. And David Morrison? David got greedy. He wanted more money to keep quiet. Then when I refused, he threatened to expose everything. He became a liability. "So you had him killed?" "I had a problem solved," Richard said coldly. "Just like I solved the Maya Chen problem. You should be thanking me, Daniel. I protected you from getting involved with a woman who could have destroyed your reputation." Daniel stood slowly, his hands clenched into fists. "Maya wasn't the threat to my reputation. You were." "Don't be naive," Richard sneered. "You think your precious Maya is some innocent victim? She's nobody, Daniel. A failed CEO from a nothing company. What could she possibly offer someone like you?" "She offered me something I thought I'd lost forever," Daniel said quietly. "She offered me hope." The words hung in the air between them, carrying the weight of Daniel's realization. For the first time since Sarah's death, he'd felt alive again with Maya. She'd made him laugh, challenged his assumptions, and shown him that success wasn't measured only in dollars and acquisitions. "I want you out of my company," Daniel said firmly. "Today." "You can't be serious. We're partners." "We were partners. Now you're a criminal who's going to pay for what you've done. Richard's expression turned dangerous. You'll never prove any of this. David Morrison is dead and it's his word against mine. Actually, Jennifer Morrison said with grim satisfaction, it's his voice against yours. I have over 6 hours of recorded conversations detailing everything you did to Maya and how you planned to eliminate my brother if he became a problem. Richard stared at her for a long moment. Then his shoulders slumped in defeat. 20 minutes later, he was being escorted from the building by security, while Daniel made frantic phone calls to lawyers, accountants, and private investigators. But there was only one call that really mattered, and Daniel made it last. Detective Rodriguez, this is Daniel Sterling. I have evidence in the David Morrison case that you need to see immediately, and I need help finding someone who's been living under false accusations for 6 months. As he hung up the phone, Daniel realized that finding Maya was only half the battle. The other half would be convincing her to forgive him for believing Richard's lies, for choosing his fear over her truth, for letting her walk back into the night when she'd needed him most. But he'd move heaven and earth to make things right. Maya Chen deserved nothing less than the complete truth, Richard Webb's punishment, and if Daniel was very lucky, a second chance at the love they'd both been too afraid to claim. Emma had been asking every day when Maya was coming home. Soon, Daniel hoped. Very soon. Maya huddled in the doorway of a closed bookstore, watching the news report on her phone with disbelief. Richard Webb's arrest had made national headlines. Tech executive arrested for murder fraud, and Maya's name had been mentioned as one of his victims. After 3 weeks of sleeping in shelters and scraping together enough money for food, vindication felt surreal. Her phone rang with a number she recognized but hadn't expected to see again. Maya? Daniel's voice was rough, uncertain. Please don't hang up. I saw the news, she said quietly. Is it true? Is Richard really in custody? Yes. And Maya, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have trusted. You protected your daughter, Maya interrupted. I understand why you made the choice you did. No, you don't understand. Daniel's voice was urgent now. I didn't choose Emma over you. I chose fear over faith. I was scared of caring about someone again, scared of what it might mean for Emma if I got it wrong. So when Richard gave me an excuse to push you away, I took it. Maya closed her eyes, leaning against the cold brick wall behind her. Daniel, where are you? Please let me come get you. I'm fine. I've been staying at a women's shelter. Maya, please. Emma asks about you every day. She cries at night because she thinks you left because of something she did. That broke something in Maya's chest. She knows it wasn't her fault, right? You told her? I told her that grown-ups sometimes make mistakes and that I made a big one by letting you go. I told her that if I could find you, I'd spend the rest of my life making it up to both of you. Maya's vision blurred with tears she'd been holding back for weeks. Daniel, I can't just pick up where we left off. Too much has happened. Richard destroyed my life, my company, Your company wasn't destroyed, it was stolen, and I'm going to help you get it back. Maya's breath caught. What do you mean? Richard's assets are being frozen pending investigation. That includes the patents and intellectual property he stole from Chen Dynamics. My lawyers think we can make a case for full restitution. For a moment, Maya couldn't speak. Chen Dynamics had been her life's work, the company she'd built from nothing with her father's blessing and her own determination. The thought of getting it back seemed impossible. Why would you help me? She finally asked. Because I love you. The words hung in the cold December air, simple and earth-shattering. Maya felt her carefully constructed walls crumble completely. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know you make the best hot chocolate I've ever tasted. I know you're brilliant enough to intimidate Richard Webb and kind enough to comfort a grieving 6-year-old. I know you're brave enough to sleep on the street rather than compromise your principles, and stubborn enough to correct a billionaire's grammar. Despite everything, Maya found herself smiling through her tears. That was your corporate speak, not your grammar. See, you're doing it again. Daniel's voice was warm with affection and something that might have been relief. Maya, will you please let me come find you? Let me bring you home? Home. The word hit Maya with unexpected force. She'd spent months thinking home was a place, her apartment, her office, the life she'd built. But sitting in a doorway on a frozen street talking to Daniel, she realized home wasn't a place at all. "I'm at the corner of Broadway and 72nd, she said softly. "There's a bookstore called Pages and Possibilities. Don't move. I'll be there in 10 minutes. As Maya waited, she thought about the events that had led her to this moment. Richard's betrayal, David's death, the weeks of fear and uncertainty. It had all seemed like senseless cruelty. But maybe it had been necessary to bring her to this corner, to this phone call, to this moment of choosing between fear and hope. Daniel's BMW pulled up to the curb exactly 9 minutes later. He emerged from the car looking like he'd thrown on the first clothes he could find. Jeans, a sweater, sneakers instead of his usual polished dress shoes. His hair was mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his eyes were bright with something Maya was afraid to identify. "Maya," he breathed. And then she was in his arms, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with winter air and something that was purely him. "I'm sorry," she sobbed against his chest. "I'm sorry I brought all this chaos into your life." "You didn't bring chaos," Daniel said fiercely, his arms tightening around her. "You brought light. You brought laughter. You brought Emma more joy in 3 days than she'd had in 3 months. Maya pulled back to look at his face, needing to see his eyes when she asked the question that had been haunting her. "What if we can't make this work? What if my past keeps catching up with us? What if—" Daniel silenced her with a kiss that was soft and desperate and full of promises Maya was finally ready to believe. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "Then we'll face it together," he said simply. "Maya, I spent 3 years thinking love was something that happened to other people, something I'd had once and lost forever. You showed me that hearts can heal, that families can grow, that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. Even from women sleeping in doorways, especially from women sleeping in doorways." Daniel's smile was soft and teasing. "Though I have to say your timing was perfect. Emma had just finished praying for someone nice to help Daddy stop burning toast." Maya laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep in her chest. "Well, we can't disappoint a praying 6-year-old. Does that mean you'll come home?" Daniel asked, hope and vulnerability clear in his voice. "I'll come home," Maya said, then added with a slight smirk. "But I'm going to need a formal job offer this time, with benefits and a very detailed job description." "I was thinking more along the lines of a permanent position," Daniel replied, his eyes twinkling. "Something in the family business." "What family business?" Daniel dropped to one knee right there on the sidewalk, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Maya's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was happening. "Maya Chen," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Will you marry me? Will you be Emma's mother and my partner in everything? Will you help me turn a house into a home and teach me that the best investments aren't always measured in dollars? Are you proposing to me on a street corner?" Maya asked, laughing through her tears. "I'm proposing to you where I found you," Daniel corrected, "where everything started. Where a little girl's question changed all our lives." Maya looked down at the man who'd seen past her circumstances to her worth, who'd chosen love over fear, who was offering her not just his heart, but his daughter's future. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." As Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, Maya realized that Richard Webb had been wrong about everything. He'd thought destroying her company would break her spirit, that framing her for crimes would make her worthless, that turning Daniel against her would leave her with nothing. Instead, he'd forced her to discover what really mattered. Not money or status or professional success, but love and trust, and the courage to build something new from the ashes of what came before. "Emma's going to be so excited," Daniel said, standing and pulling Maya close again. "She's been planning your wedding since the day you left. Apparently it involves 14 flower girls and a cake shaped like a dragon." "A dragon?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "Her idea, not mine. I just provide the funding for her creative visions." "Well then," Maya said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss her fiancé, "I guess we'd better start planning a very memorable wedding." As they drove home through the city lights, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her blood chilled as she read it, but when she looked up, Daniel was watching her with concern. "What is it?" Maya deleted the message without showing him. Some threats weren't worth acknowledging, and some shadows from the past were better left buried. Richard Webb would be in prison for a very long time, but his influence had reached far and wide. There would always be people who believed his version of events, who saw Maya as a criminal who'd escaped justice. But for the first time in months, Maya wasn't afraid. She had Daniel's love, Emma's trust, and the strength that came from surviving the worst someone could do to her and emerging whole on the other side. "Nothing important," she said, taking Daniel's hand as they pulled into the building's garage. "Just someone who has the wrong number." 3 hours later, as Maya tucked a sleepy Emma into bed after an evening of celebration, tears and dragon-shaped wedding cake planning, she felt something she'd thought was lost forever: complete and utter peace. "Maya?" Emma's sleepy voice called as Maya reached the door. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to stay forever this time?" Maya looked back at the little girl who'd asked the innocent question that started everything, who'd offered her scarf to a stranger, who'd prayed for someone to help her daddy stop burning toast. "Forever and always," Maya promised. "Nothing in the world could make me leave you again." As she closed Emma's door and walked toward the master bedroom where Daniel was waiting, Maya smiled at the irony. Richard Webb had tried to destroy her by taking away everything she thought she needed. Instead, he'd led her to everything she'd never known she wanted. Sometimes the best revenge was simply living well. And Maya Chen Sterling was planning to live very, very well indeed.